The keys felt heavier in my palm than I expected. That was the first small surprise of the day, one of many that would follow, each one progressively less small, less surprising, and increasingly surreal. I stood in the doorway of my home, a 1940s craftsman bungalow with original hardwood floors and a wraparound porch painted sage green. And I let myself believe, for exactly one uninterrupted minute, that I had done something real. That the 8 years of overtime shifts, skipped vacations, and spreadsheets tracking every dollar had meant something concrete. That this moment, right here, belonged to me. The minute ended when my phone buzzed. It was my mother, asking for the address. Not asking if she could visit, not requesting a time that worked for me. Just asking for the address, the way someone asks for directions to a place they've already decided to go. The certainty in her phrasing, not a question mark, really, just the statement, "Send us the address," should have warned me. But I was still in that first-time homeowner fog, the kind where everything feels possible, and you haven't yet remembered that some people will take your possibility and treat it like a group project. I texted her the address. Then I walked through my house again, slowly this time. The living room was bare except for the couch I'd ordered from a discount furniture outlet, the kind that would take 6 weeks to arrive. The kitchen had cabinets that stuck and linoleum that the inspector had flagged as original, which meant old, which meant probably harboring a few regrets about the last 70 years. The master bedroom was small, barely fitting a queen mattress I'd been sleeping on since my apartment days. The second bedroom was smaller still, 8 by 10, maybe, but I'd imagined it as an office someday, a place where my own work could live. I was still walking through, still breathing in the wood smell and the potential, when the first vehicle pulled into my driveway. It was my father's truck, the Ford F-150 he'd owned for 6 years and would probably own for 6 more, the kind of reliable that made him seem dependable in ways he wasn't, really, just consistent with his own inaction. He parked at an angle, like he had somewhere to be and couldn't commit to being fully settled. My mother got out of the passenger side before the truck had completely stopped moving. She was wearing the outfit she always wore to make announcements, the cashmere sweater, the jeans that suggested she still tried, her blonde highlights looking fresh from the salon. She did that strategically, looking put together for things that required her to be taken seriously. I recognized the armor. "Em!" she called out, waving as if she'd spotted me across a crowded airport terminal instead of standing in her daughter's driveway at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday when she should have been at her Pilates class. "We got your message and just had to see it." Behind the truck, a minivan pulled in, then another car. My brother Ryan emerged from the minivan with my sister-in-law Melissa, and their 3 children cascaded out like a clown car reversed. Suddenly there were so many people that my driveway looked like it had shrunk. My brother was holding a pizza box. Melissa had a bag of groceries in each hand. The kids were already running toward the porch. I felt something in my chest shift. Not tighten, exactly. More like a door opening that I hadn't given permission to open. "I didn't know you were all coming," I said when my mother reached me. I meant it as a statement, but it came out like a question. "Surprise," my father said, and smiled the smile of a man who had done the minimum required to be present. He was already reaching past me, moving into the house, looking around with the appraisal of someone entering property that might interest him. "Everyone's excited to see the new place," my mother said, touching my shoulder in a way that was supposed to be affectionate but felt like a claim. "We can't believe our Emily bought a house. Come on, everyone, take your shoes off. We need to respect Emily's property." That phrasing, I'd noticed later, carried its own irony. The requirement to respect my property was coming from the person about to treat it like common ground. "Mom, I didn't plan anything," I started, but Ryan was already moving past me, already assessing the living room with the intensity of someone mentally redecorating. His daughter, 7-year-old Sophie, had attached herself to my leg, and I found myself patting her head while trying to construct a sentence that would make sense of what was happening. "This is so cute," Melissa said warmly, squeezing my arm. She was always the warm one, the one who made Ryan seem like an accident instead of a choice. "Really am. So, homey." Homey was a polite word for small. I understood the subtext, the implication that they, would need something bigger. "Well, let's get the suitcases," my mother said to my father, and that word, suitcases, plural, hit me like a specific kind of cold. Not shock, exactly, because shock requires a moment of not knowing. This was different. This was the moment where what I'd feared but not articulated suddenly became real. "Suitcases?" I repeated. "We figured we'd spend a few days," my mother said breezily, already heading back toward the truck. "You know how it is? We wanted to help you settle in, make sure you've got everything you need." "We didn't figure that," I thought. "You figured that. You alone assumed this and then made it true by showing up as if it were already decided." But I didn't say that. I smiled. I watched my father pull 2 large suitcases from the truck bed, and I felt the familiar heaviness of being the person who doesn't make things difficult. The reliable one. The responsible one. The one who would figure out how to make this work, because figuring things out was who I had been trained to be. "The guest room is small," I offered, which was both true and the most aggressive thing I could manage in that moment. "Perfect," my mother said. "We'll make it work. We're a family. We always make it work." We did make it work. Or rather, I made it work, which meant they didn't have to. I found blankets for the couch where my father settled in to watch a baseball game that didn't particularly interest him. I cleared the small office space I'd been imagining for myself so my mother could hang her clothes. I improvised a sleeping arrangement in the master bedroom for Ryan's family that left me with 8 inches of mattress space and the knowledge that my quiet sanctuary had become a thoroughfare. By evening, my home smelled like the pizza they'd brought, like a family dinner that nobody had invited me to plan, and like something else, something like an occupation. I stood in my kitchen, which suddenly seemed very small and very public, and tried to remember what I'd planned to do on this day, before they arrived, when this was still my day, my celebration, my house. The next morning, I discovered something that changed the tenor of everything. My mother was drinking coffee at my kitchen table, and on her laptop was my mortgage application. Not a blank one, a completed one. My name, my social security number, my employment history, all of it, filled out in precise bureaucratic detail. Below that, a draft email to a real estate agent about properties in my area. Properties that ranged from $450,000 to $650,000. My house had cost $285,000. Every dollar of it was saved by me. Every payment would be made by me. "What is this?" I asked. My voice sounded small in my own kitchen, in my own house. My mother looked up from her coffee like I'd asked her what time it was, like the answer was obvious and the question slightly silly. "We were just exploring options," she said. "You know, for a bigger place. Something with 4 bedrooms, maybe a guest house situation. I was thinking we could co-sign with you, upgrade to something with more space." "We," I repeated. "The family. Your dad and I. He has excellent credit, and with his income added to yours, you'd qualify for much more. Ryan's kids need their own rooms. They shouldn't be in a master bedroom with their parents." That was the phrasing that broke something in me. Not anger, not yet. But the beginning of anger, the small cold seed of it. The assertion that her son's children's bedroom situation was my responsibility. That my house existed in a universe where their comfort was a priority, and I was the problem for suggesting otherwise. "This is my application," I said, pointing at the screen. "My social security number. How do you have this?" "From the mortgage company," my mother said. "When you added me to the list, I called and got the information. Standard stuff. They didn't ask any questions." She was lying. I knew she was lying the way you know a particular bird's call, not because you've studied ornithology, but because you've heard it specific 1,000 times. The lie was so casual, so confident, that it almost worked. Almost made me doubt my own question about whether they would actually just give application information to someone who called and asked. They wouldn't, which meant she hadn't called, which meant she'd done something else. Something that required my information. Something that felt like a small violation that was actually massive. "Mom," I said carefully. "Did you complete this application yourself?" "Your father and I thought it would be helpful," she said. "We knew you'd want to look at bigger places, but probably didn't have time with your work schedule. We were just trying to make it easier for you. We didn't finalize anything, Emily. Don't be dramatic." Don't be dramatic. The two words that had defined my inability to express anything real for my entire life. Don't be dramatic when your tuition fund was moved to cover Ryan's failed venture capital startup. Don't be dramatic when you worked 70 hours a week senior year of college to graduate without debt. Don't be dramatic when you watched your brother move through life with the confidence of someone who'd never had to worry about consequences. Don't be dramatic. You used my identity to complete a mortgage application without my permission, I said. The words sounded strange in my mouth, clinical and true. That's identity theft. It's not identity theft when it's family, my mother said. She said this the way people say obvious things, like I was being unreasonable for not understanding something that had always been true. It's not like you have anything to hide. Your finances are fine. We just wanted to show you the possibilities. But that wasn't what this was. This wasn't about showing me possibilities. This was about deciding for me. This was about my mother taking my legal identity and using it to create a financial obligation I hadn't consented to, all while framing it as helpfulness, as family, as something I should have already known was going to happen. I closed the laptop. "I need everyone to leave," I said. My mother laughed, actually laughed, like I'd made a joke she didn't understand yet. "Em, come on. We're in the middle of helping you settle." "I need everyone to leave my house," I repeated. The words tasted like metal, like a line I'd never actually drawn before. Not really. Not when it mattered. "Today." "Don't be like this," my mother said, and her voice shifted into the wounded tone that had defined my childhood. The sound of a woman who'd been hurt by the unreasonable demands of her daughter, who'd sacrificed everything and was being repaid with ingratitude. "You're upset about something that was done out of love." Love. There it was. The word that had excused everything, that had made my brother's failures into learning experiences, that had made my financial responsibility into being the strong one, that had turned my mother's control into care. "Please get your things," I said, "all of you." But by that evening, they hadn't left. And the reason they hadn't left was because my brother called his wife's mother, who called my mother's sister, who called a cousin, and before I understood how it happened, I was getting text messages from extended family explaining to me that I was being selfish, that I needed to understand privilege, that not everyone got family the way I was privileged enough to have family, that blood meant something. My Aunt Patricia texted, "Your mother raised you to be better than this." My cousin Jennifer posted on Facebook, "Sometimes the person who raised you needs you. Family isn't always convenient." My father, the next morning, tried a different approach. He sat in my kitchen, in my house, that I'd bought with my own money, and explained that my mother was devastated, that she'd been thinking of me, that compromise was the mark of a mature person. "She used my social security number," I said again, as if the repetition might eventually make him understand that this was not a matter of perspective or maturity or compromise. "It wasn't like she was trying to hurt you," he said. "She just got excited about the possibilities. I'd heard variations of this my entire life. Ryan hit your favorite toy from your hand. He wasn't trying to hurt you. He just got excited. Ryan cost $8,000 by dropping out of his accounting program. He wasn't trying to hurt the family. He just realized it wasn't for him. Ryan crashed his financed vehicle. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone. These things happen." And every time, my responsibility had been to absorb the impact, to be the stable one, to not make it more difficult, to be mature about disappointment. That afternoon, I called a lawyer. I learned that what my mother had done wasn't quite identity theft. The legal definition required intent to commit fraud, and she could argue she'd intended to help. But it was close. It was the kind of close that made me feel sick. The kind of close that meant my relationship with my mother existed in a space where my legal identity wasn't actually mine. where my consent wasn't necessary, where her intentions mattered more than my autonomy. The lawyer, a woman named Margaret Chen with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, explained my options. I could send a cease and desist letter. I could place a fraud alert on my credit. I could file a police report. But, she said gently, none of that will undo the fact that you're going to have conversations you don't want to have, with your family, about what you're willing to accept and what you're not. That seemed like an understatement. By the following Monday, a full week after I'd stood alone in my house and let myself believe it was mine, I was still sharing it with people who had never been invited to stay. My brother had extended their visit indefinitely. His boss had apparently been flexible. The kids had been enrolled in the local elementary school. My mother had already begun plans to repaint the second bedroom. That was when I stopped being sympathetic and started being strategic. I called my bank and placed a fraud alert. I called the real estate company and confirmed that yes, a mortgage application had been submitted. Yes, it had been completed with my information, and no, I had not authorized it. The woman on the phone became very professional very quickly. Then I went home, and I waited until everyone was gathered. My parents and Ryan and Melissa and the kids, all sitting in my living room watching Netflix like we were a normal family who lived together, and I asked them to leave. Now please, not this time. Your mortgage application has been flagged with the lender, I said. I was standing, they were sitting, and I was so calm I barely recognized my own voice. I've placed a fraud alert on my credit. I've spoken to an attorney, and I need you to leave my home today, in the next 2 hours. My mother's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock. Then a kind of wounded anger. Emily, we were just trying to help, she started. You used my identity without my permission, I said. That was not help. That was a violation of my legal rights and my autonomy. I have been understanding. I have been patient. I have been the reliable one my entire life, and I'm done. Ryan looked like he might say something. Melissa put a hand on his arm, which I understood to mean she already knew her life was about to get very inconvenient and didn't want to make it worse. If you leave now, I won't press charges, I continued. If you don't, I will. This is not a negotiation. This is me telling you what's going to happen. My father stood up. I thought he was going to argue, but instead, he just looked tired. Like he'd been tired for a very long time and had only just admitted it to himself. Linda, he said to my mother, let's go. But, she started. I said, let's go, my father repeated. And there was something in his voice that I'd never heard before. Not anger, exactly, but a kind of exhaustion that had finally become action. It took them 4 hours to pack. Not 2. 4. My mother kept finding reasons to stay longer, kept saying things like, we can work this out, and you're being irrational, kept trying to negotiate as if this were something open for discussion. When they finally left, my mother didn't hug me. She just looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite name. Hurt, certainly, but also something else. Something like disappointment. Like I'd failed at the one thing I was supposed to be good at, which was making her feel comfortable. They drove away in 2 vehicles, with my brother following in his minivan, and I stood in the doorway of my house and watched them go. No one turned around. No one waved. My father kept his eyes on the road. I closed the door behind them, and the silence was so complete it felt like a presence. That night I called Rachel. Rachel Moore had been my best friend since sophomore year of high school, which meant she'd watched my entire family life play out in real time. She'd been there for the birthday dinners where my mother made it about herself. She'd been there for the college years where I worked nights to cover my own tuition. She'd been there for every moment where I'd minimized myself to make someone else feel bigger. I'm driving over, she said, before I'd even finished explaining. Don't call anyone else. We're going to make this house yours again. When Rachel arrived, I realized I'd been crying. Not from sadness, exactly. From the kind of release that comes after holding something in too long. She found me in the master bedroom, sitting on my bed, and she just sat next to me without saying anything, Eventually, she spoke. "Do you remember sophomore year," she said, "when you were going to quit debate team because your mom said it interfered with family dinners that happened to be on Thursday, and I told you that she was controlling and you cried because you felt guilty for noticing?" "Kind of," I said, though I actually remembered very clearly. I remembered the guilt. That was the thing about having a mother like mine. The guilt was always louder than the anger. "This is the same," Rachel said. "It's just more expensive now. Your mom is still treating you like your job is to make her comfortable, and you're still trying to do it even though you're 30 now and own a house." 29, I corrected automatically. "Still old enough to not need your parents' permission to say no," Rachel said. "Which, by the way, you were completely right to do. What your mom did was actually illegal. You know that, right? Like, objectively criminal?" I nodded. I did know. But knowing and believing were different things. Knowing lived in my mind. Believing lived somewhere deeper, and I'd been trained not to let it live there. We cleaned my house that night, not because it was dirty, but because it still smelled like them, like the occupation, and we needed to reclaim it. Rachel and I opened all the windows. It was December in Idaho, and it was cold, but we did it anyway. We made tea and sat on my living room floor, and we talked about nothing important. That was the gift of real friendship. Not the understanding that came with explaining, but the presence that didn't require explanation. "You should stay," I told Rachel. "I have a guest room." "I thought it was 8 by 10 and barely fit a desk," she said, smiling. "Well, it's 8 by 10 and I'm reclaiming it for myself," I said. "But the couch is nice. I might upgrade the master bedroom eventually, but the couch is actually comfortable." "Then I'll stay," Rachel said. She stayed for 3 days. We didn't talk about my family much, which was its own kind of healing. We cooked in my kitchen. We walked around my neighborhood. We sat on my porch and watched the holiday decorations on nearby houses light up as December moved forward. She treated my home like it was mine, like my triumph in purchasing it was something to celebrate, not exploit. Like my autonomy was something to respect, not circumvent. On her last night, Rachel helped me decorate my living room. We hung some string lights I'd bought on a whim, but never felt I deserved to display. We moved my one piece of art, a watercolor of the Oregon coast that I'd bought at a gallery in Portland years ago but had kept rolled up in my closet, into a place of honor on the main wall. It was a small thing, a fraction of what I might have done with more confidence, but it felt like claiming something that had always been mine. "This is nice," Rachel said, standing back to look at it. "It's mine," I said. "The house, the walls, that painting, all of it. I paid for it. I'm allowed to enjoy it." "You're allowed to enjoy more than that," Rachel said. "You're allowed to enjoy your life." That was the thing, I realized. Not just my house, but my entire life had been structured around other people's needs, around Ryan's failures and my mother's control and my father's paralysis. I'd organized myself around their orbit, like I was a moon that only made sense in relation to other planets. After Rachel left, the silence of my house felt different. Not lonely, just quiet. The kind of quiet where you could finally hear yourself think. The responses came slowly. My mother called twice. I didn't answer. She left voicemails that I didn't listen to. My father sent an email apologizing for the misunderstanding being my refusal to let my identity be used without consent, and asking if we could talk. I didn't respond. My brother texted asking if I was really going to do this over something his wife's mother had misunderstood about my mother's intentions. His wife's mother had not been present. My mother had very clearly understood my social security number, but the text illustrated something important. They were already reframing it. Already turning identity theft into misunderstanding. Already transforming my boundary into my problem. It took 16 days. That was how long it took after I'd asked them to leave before my mother showed up at my office. I worked for a design firm in downtown Boise, a small agency that did branding work for tech companies and local businesses. My desk faced away from the main entrance, which meant my mother had been standing in the office for a full minute before anyone told me she was there. I saw her reflection in my monitor before I saw her. She looked smaller somehow. Or maybe I was seeing her differently. That was what boundaries did. They changed your perspective. "We need to talk," she said. I turned around slowly. "I'm at work," I said. "I know. I've been waiting for you to leave, but you've been avoiding my calls, and I need you to understand what's happening here." What was happening was that my mother couldn't control me at home, so she was trying at work. That was how it worked with people like her. They found the angle where you couldn't easily leave. "Let's go outside," I said. I didn't want her in my office. I didn't want my work to be contaminated with this. In the parking lot, with the December cold making our breath visible, my mother started to cry. "You're making this very difficult," she said. "For yourself and for your father. He's devastated that you won't talk to us." "My father drove away and hasn't contacted me in 16 days, I said. "So no, he's not devastated about me not talking. He's fine with not talking. He's respecting your space," my mother said. "He's giving you time to calm down so we can discuss this rationally." "There's nothing to discuss," I said. "You violated my trust and my legal rights. I asked you to leave. You left. That's the end of the story." "It's not the end of the story," my mother said, and now she wasn't crying anymore. Now she was angry. "The end of the story is that you remember you're a Carter and you act like one. You remember that we're your family, and family means something." "Family means something," I agreed. "Which is exactly why I can't let this continue. You taught me, or you thought you taught me, that family can do whatever they want to you, and you have to accept it because it's done out of love. But I don't accept that anymore. That's not what family means. Family means respecting someone's autonomy. Family means not using someone's identity. Family means accepting their no." "You're being ungrateful," my mother said, "after everything we've done for you." "You've done things for me because you wanted to," I said. "And you've used those things to justify doing things to me. That's not generosity. That's transaction disguised as love." I thought about my college tuition fund, the one I'd watched my parents move to cover my brother's failed investment venture. I'd never said anything, never made it a problem, just quietly worked the extra hours and borrowed the rest. Because that was who I was supposed to be. The steady one, the backup plan. "You're going to regret this," my mother said. "You're going to be alone, and you're going to realize you needed us." "Maybe," I said. "But I'll be alone in my own house, with my own life, making my own decisions. That seems like a price worth paying." My mother looked at me like she didn't recognize me, which was fair, in a way. She didn't. She'd known a version of me that was constructed for her benefit, and I'd just shown her a version that wasn't. She didn't leave immediately. She stood there, trying to recalibrate, trying to find the angle that would work. But she was out of angles, and eventually she realized that. "I'll tell your father you said hello," she said finally. "Don't," I said, "just don't." She left, and I stood in the parking lot for a while, watching the traffic on Main Street, feeling the cold in my fingers and not moving to warm them up. It wasn't a victory, exactly. It was more like a closing, like a door shutting that I'd been holding open for a long time. The weeks after that were quiet, in a way I hadn't experienced since childhood. Quiet, without the underlying tension. Quiet, without the waiting for the next demand, the next crisis that required my intervention, the next moment where my responsibility eclipsed my own needs. Christmas came, and I didn't go home. My parents didn't ask me to. For the first time since I could remember, I spent the holiday alone. Not lonely, alone. And I made a meal I wanted to eat, watched movies I wanted to watch, and didn't perform any version of myself for anyone. Rachel came over on Boxing Day, and we spent the afternoon on my porch, talking about work and dating and what we wanted for the new year. Normal things. The kinds of conversations I'd never had enough mental space for because I was always worried about someone else's crisis. "You seem different," Rachel said. "I feel different," I said. "Good different or weird different?" "Both," I said. "But I think they might be the same thing." I might have been weird when I was performing for my family, and now that I'm not, I'm just regular. And regular seems good. By mid-January, my house had become mine in a way that extends beyond legal documentation. The walls held only things I wanted to see. The kitchen cabinets had only things I wanted to cook with. The second bedroom was empty except for a yoga mat and some storage, a space that was mine just because it was mine. I painted the master bedroom a soft blue-gray. It took 4 days and cost me $80 and made the room feel like it was breathing in a way it hadn't before. I hung curtains that were actually aesthetically pleasing instead of functional. I bought a nicer headboard. My couch arrived at the end of January, and for the first time since I'd bought the house, I could sit in my living room without feeling like I was waiting for someone to sit with me. Then, on a Thursday evening in early February, my father called. I almost didn't answer. But something in me, a sense that I'd already won and couldn't lose anymore, made me pick up. "Hi, Dad," I said. "Hi, Em," he said, and his voice sounded old in a way I'd never really noticed before. "How are you?" "I'm good," I said. "How are you?" "I wanted to apologize," he said, "for how we handled things, for what your mother did with your information, for not stopping it, for not standing up when you asked us to leave." I appreciated the apology. It was more than I'd expected from him. But it also didn't change anything. "Thank you," I said carefully. "I appreciate that. Your mother and I have been talking," he continued. "Or I should say, I've been talking and she's been listening. About boundaries. About the way we treated you versus the way we treated your brother. About how we justified it." "Okay," I said. This was interesting, but I was cautious. I'd learned to be cautious. "I don't know if this is something you want," my father said, "but I'd like to visit your house. Just me. No agenda. I just want to see what you've built. If that's something you'd be comfortable with." I thought about it. I thought about what it would mean to let him back in. Not let him move in. Not let him take over. Not let him become comfortable enough to do it again. But just let him visit. Let him see the thing I'd made. "Okay," I said. "But I'm setting the terms. You visit for an afternoon, you respect my space, and if anything feels wrong, you leave." "Those seem reasonable," he said. We set it for the following Sunday. When my father arrived, he was alone, which felt like its own kind of respectful. He came empty-handed, which also meant something. He wasn't trying to buy his way into approval. He was just coming to see. He walked through the house slowly, commenting on the paint color, the artwork, the way I'd organized my kitchen. Nothing was forced. He was genuinely looking, genuinely present. "It's nice," he said. "It's really nice, Em. You should be proud of this." "I am," I said, and I meant it. I am proud of it, and I'm proud of myself for getting here. He nodded. We sat on my porch. It was still cold, but it was clear. And he told me that my mother had said some things he couldn't repeat, and that they were probably done as a married couple, and that he was very sorry for pretending not to see what was happening for so long. "Are you going to leave her?" I asked. "I think I need to," he said. "I can't spend the rest of my life avoiding conflict. That's what got us here." I didn't comfort him. That wasn't my job anymore. But I let him sit with what he'd said, and I thought about all the years he could have done this, and I chose to focus on the fact that he was doing it now. Before he left, he asked if he could come back. I said yes, maybe next month. He seemed relieved, like he'd been expecting something worse. After he left, I stood in my living room and realized that something had shifted. Not reconciliation, not really, but a kind of reset. The possibility that I could have a relationship with my father that didn't require me to absorb everything my mother created. That seemed worth exploring. Ryan and I never talked directly. I heard through my father that he was renting a small house in Nampa, that his marriage was strained, that he was going through something. I heard that he'd finally gotten a job that stuck, working in property management, and was making an actual salary. I heard that his kids had adjusted to not having a room in my house, which I found grimly amusing. I didn't reach out. I didn't need to. My brother had made his choices, and I was no longer going to be the one absorbing the consequences of them. That seemed fair to everyone, including him. My mother, I heard nothing from, not until April. The email came on a Tuesday morning, and it was brief. Emily, I owe you an apology for what I did with your mortgage information. Your father explained that this constituted a violation of your trust and legally crossed a line. I was wrong. I was trying to be helpful, but I was not respecting your autonomy or your right to make your own decisions. I'm sorry for that. I'm also sorry that I handled your boundary setting poorly and made it about my feelings instead of respecting yours. I'm working on that. I hope someday we can talk about rebuilding this relationship. But I understand that I'm not in a position to ask for that right now. I need to earn your trust back. Take care of yourself. Ma. I read it 3 times. I believed maybe 60% of it. The apology seemed genuine, but I also knew that my mother was capable of performing sincerity as well as she performed hurt. I didn't respond immediately. I thought about it for a few days, and then I drafted a reply. Hi, Mom. Thank you for your apology. I appreciate the specificity of it. Acknowledging exactly what you did wrong matters. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I'm open to a conversation eventually. Until then, I need you to respect that I have a life that exists independently of the family. I need you to stop making decisions for me. I need you to accept when I say no. These are the conditions for any relationship we might have going forward. When you're ready to operate within those conditions, without resentment or guilt, let me know. Emily. I hit send, and then I deleted the draft so I couldn't second-guess myself. She responded a week later. I understand. I'm ready to try. I didn't know if I believed her, but I also knew that belief wasn't required for me to set this boundary. For me to say, this is what I need, and if you can't meet it, we don't have a relationship. This is what I need, and I'm not negotiating it. That was the real power, I realized. Not that I had to trust her, but that I no longer needed to. By May, my life had become something almost unrecognizable from what it had been 6 months earlier. I'd been promoted at work. I was managing a small team, and I loved it because I could set boundaries there too. Clear expectations, clear communication, respect for people's time. My boss noticed that I was more decisive than I'd been before, less apologetic about my decisions. She asked me what had changed. I set a boundary with my family, I said. And it turned out I was actually pretty good at it. She smiled. It shows. Keep it up. Rachel and I took a weekend trip to Portland in May. We stayed in a nice hotel, ate at restaurants I'd never let myself afford before, and I bought myself a piece of jewelry, a gold bracelet with small moon phases on it, just because I wanted it, just because I was allowed to want things. My house was starting to look lived in, not cluttered, but warm. There was evidence of me everywhere. The books I was reading, the plants I was learning to keep alive, the photographs I'd printed and framed of moments I'd actually wanted to remember. In June, I installed floating shelves in the second bedroom and started filling them with a personal library. Not books my mother thought I should read, or books my college professors had assigned. Books I actually wanted to read. My father came for a visit every other Sunday. We were rebuilding something, but it wasn't the same thing that had been there before. It was quieter, more cautious, more honest. He talked about his separation. I listened. I offered perspective when asked, but mostly I just let him work through his own stuff. It was a revelation, actually, having a parent who didn't require me to fix him. I'm sorry, he said one Sunday in July, for all the years you carried things that weren't yours to carry. Yeah, I said, me too. My mother and I exchanged emails occasionally, nothing personal. Logistics about family stuff, questions about whether I'd be at my grandmother's birthday party in August. I didn't commit to anything. I said I was managing my own schedule and would let her know. The birthday party was in mid-August, at my grandmother's house in Salt Lake City. I almost didn't go, but my grandmother had been kind to me in her quiet way. and I thought she deserved to see that I was okay, that I'd survived whatever my family's dysfunction had needed to do to me. It was awkward. That was unavoidable. My mother was there, looking smaller than I remembered her. My brother was there with Melissa, but the kids weren't. My father was there separately from my mother, which said everything about where their relationship had settled. Uncomfortable, but necessary. At one point, my grandmother pulled me aside and said, "I'm proud of you for not letting them destroy you." I didn't know how much she knew. But the fact that she saw it, the fact that someone in the family understood that what had been happening was destructive, made something in me settle. "Thank you, Grandma," I said. By the time the new year came around, my life had developed a rhythm that felt sustainable. Work was good. My house was mine in every meaningful way. I had friends who respected me. I had space, actual physical space and internal psychological space, that was entirely mine. My mother and I had 3 phone conversations in the last months of the year. They were cordial, careful conversations where we discussed nothing important, but they also didn't require me to perform. I was allowed to just be present without adding value, without making anyone comfortable, without being responsible for anyone else's emotional regulation. On New Year's Eve, I stood on my front porch and looked at my house. The lights in the windows, the wreath on the door, the path of my driveway disappearing into the December darkness. I'd bought this with money I'd earned. I'd defended it against people who'd wanted to take it from me. I'd made it mine. Rachel came over at 11:30, and we sat with champagne and watched the ball drop on my television. And I made a resolution that for the first time in my life was just for me. Just about what I wanted. Not about being understanding or accommodating or reliable. Just about moving forward in a way that honored the person I was becoming. To boundaries, Rachel said, raising her glass. To being allowed to want things, I said. Same thing, Rachel said, and clinked her glass against mine. The champagne was cold and slightly too sweet, and it was perfect. Everything in that moment was perfect, because it was exactly what I'd chosen. Nothing more. Nothing less. Later, after Rachel had gone home, I sat in my bedroom, the one I'd painted and decorated for myself, and I thought about all the years I'd spent making myself smaller to accommodate my family's dysfunction. All the times I'd absorbed their failures and called it love. All the moments where I'd denied my own needs, because their needs seemed more important. That person wasn't gone. I could still feel her in me, still ready to apologize when someone was hurt, still tempted to fix things that weren't my responsibility. But she wasn't in control anymore. The woman who'd learned to say no without guilt was in control now. The woman who understood that her house, her life, her identity belonged to her and no one else. I didn't know what my family would become. Maybe my parents would reconcile. Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe my brother would continue to build something real. Or maybe he'd spiral again. Maybe my mother would genuinely change. Or maybe she'd just become more subtle about control. None of that was my responsibility anymore. What was my responsibility was myself. It was this house. It was the life I was building. One small decision at a time. One quiet no at a time. One moment of choosing myself at a time. The irony, I thought, was that I'd become more responsible once I'd stopped trying to be responsible for everyone else. I was more reliable. I was more present. I was more myself. Because I had space to be those things. A few months later, in early spring, my mother called and asked if she could visit. Not surprise, not assume. Asked. "Just you?" I said. "Just me," she confirmed. I said okay. When she arrived, I could see that something had shifted in her. She was less polished. Her nails weren't done. Her hair was grayer than I remembered. She looked like a woman who'd been in conflict, not someone maintaining an image. "I wanted to see your house," she said. "Really see it. See who you are now." "Okay," I said. I showed her around. She looked at the paintings, the shelves, the plants. She didn't make suggestions about how I could improve things. She just looked. In my bedroom, she paused at the painting of the Oregon coast that I'd hung above the bed. "This is beautiful," she said. "I've had it for a long time," I said. "I just finally felt like I deserved to display it." She turned to look at me. "You deserve to display all of it," she said. "Your home, your life, your choices." I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that. I didn't say anything, because I wasn't sure if that was a transformation or a performance. But I also didn't need to be sure. I just needed to maintain my boundary. We made tea, and she sat at my kitchen table, and we talked about her separation from my father, which was now finalized. She told me about the therapist she was seeing. She didn't ask me to help her with any of it. She just told me, the way you tell someone about your life. Before she left, she asked if she could come back next month. "Maybe," I said. "I'll let you know." "That's fair," she said. She left me with her phone number and asked me to text if I needed anything. I appreciated the inversion. For the first time, the offer of help was going in the direction of actual respect. By the end of that first year in my house, I'd become someone I didn't recognize. Not in a bad way. In a way that felt like becoming myself for the first time. I wasn't angry. That was the surprising part. I'd expected to be angry for years, but the anger had burned itself out somewhere in the process of setting boundaries and defending them. What remained was just clarity. The clear understanding that I was allowed to have my own life, that my success wasn't something to be seized and leveraged, that my autonomy wasn't negotiable. My house was no longer a symbol of achievement that had to be defended. It was just a house. My house. A place where I lived, where I worked, where I invited people I wanted in, and where I maintained the right to ask people to leave if I needed to. Rachel had started calling it my fortress, as a joke. But there was truth in it. It was a fortress, but not against the world. Against the parts of my family that had tried to take ownership of me. Against the belief that I was responsible for everyone else's comfort. At work, I'd started mentoring younger designers, particularly the women. I'd tell them to set boundaries early, to not let people confuse responsibility with obligation, to understand that saying no was a skill that could be learned and practiced until it became natural. "Is this about your family?" my boss asked once. "Yeah," I said. "But it's also about me. I didn't know who I was until I stopped letting other people define me. It took a long time. I'm trying to help other people figure it out faster." The new year came again, and my house had become not just mine, but a reflection of me. The decorations I put up were things I actually liked. The food I cooked was food I wanted to eat. The person who lived here had preferences and boundaries, and a right to both. My mother and I now had a relationship. It was careful still, and it required ongoing maintenance. But it was honest. She respected my space. I didn't have to perform. She'd learned, finally, that I was not an extension of her, not a solution to her problems, not a backup plan for her life. My father and I were rebuilding something that was starting to look like actual connection, which was surprising. Turns out, once you remove all the baggage, there's someone there who loves you. Imagine that. Ryan and I never reconciled, really. We exchanged holiday cards. I'd see his kids occasionally at family events, and I was kind to them because they weren't responsible for their father's choices. But I made it clear to him that I was no longer going to be the backup plan. He had to figure out his own life. He seemed shocked by this, which said everything about how he'd come to understand family. But that wasn't my problem anymore. The last image I want to hold on to, the one that feels like the real ending, is from a normal Tuesday evening in March of my second year in this house. I'm sitting on my porch, wrapped in a blanket because it's still cold, but the worst of winter is past. The neighborhood is quiet. My house is behind me, inside with all its lights on, showing what I've built here. My coffee is warm in my hands. Rachel is on the phone. She's 3 hours away now, working a new job in Portland, and we're talking about nothing important. About her new apartment, about a guy she went on a bad date with, about whether we should plan a trip to the coast. And I realize that I'm completely present. I'm not thinking about what anyone needs from me. I'm not waiting for a crisis. I'm not building a narrative in my head about how I'm going to manage everyone else's emotions. I'm just living, in my house, on my porch, in my life. That took everything I had to build. It took sacrificing a relationship with my brother that maybe could have been salvaged. It took breaking with my mother in a way that was painful and unrecoverable for a long time. It took disappointing my father by refusing to accept his passivity, but it was worth it. That's the thing I want the story to say, in the end. That reclaiming your own life costs something, but the price is worth paying. That boundaries aren't selfish. They're the foundation of every healthy relationship, including the one you have with yourself. I bought a house. It was supposed to be a simple thing, a marker of achievement, of having finally made it. Instead, it became the thing that taught me I had the right to make it, that I had the right to things, that I was allowed to exist in the world on my own terms. My house is still small. It's still modest. It's still just a 2-bedroom craftsman bungalow in Boise, Idaho. But it's mine. And more than that, finally, I'm mine.